Going in now. Oh no.
Yeah.
I get what you were trying to do. Again, an easy way to clean this up is just scout out your target before showing your body. This is out of the 2 replays, this is a good one to go over first, in case we don't have time to fully cover both.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Let's get into it. So, Hollywood. Let's fast forward a little bit. So, looking at our DPS lineup right now, assuming no big changes, we do have a bit of a slower backline. So, keeping that in mind for our engagements, we're looking for opportunities to engage where they have line of sight and stuff like that.
Yep.
Not looking to go too deep. Bit of an awkward stall there, but you didn't get focused down. I like that you're looking to set up behind, not looking to go too deep. Okay. One thing about playing ball and like setting up these flanks, obviously, given the amount of time you spend in the open, they're going to be expecting you coming from that flank, right?
Right.
And anytime they've got heroes like this Hog, like this Tracer even, if they've got Brig marking this corner, it's going to be very easy to shut down this kind of rollout. What I would have liked to see from your POV here is taking a little bit of extra time to scout out to see if there's anyone watching for that rollout. So once we get through this, you have to know at this point that they know where you are, right? They're assuming where you're going to roll out from. So right here, you should have your camera watching right here, right before you run this corner, watching. As soon as you see this Hog, you need to be ready to react to his hook, whether that means baiting your rollout, rolling out somewhere out of his reach, just keeping that in mind. But just rolling right in front of him like that, you're asking to get hooked.
Okay.
Same thing like for Tracer. You don't want to spend too much time in Tracer's face because she's going to just tickle you down and you're going to ruin your rollout. So the engage up here on this soldier, let's just rewatch that real quick from third person to get an idea of how your team's looking. So one, this is a good location. Obviously, this is priority high ground we need to deal with. It is within range of your backline, your Zen, your soldier, I guess also your Junkrat. Can follow up on this damage, but it doesn't look like you're really trying to hard engage. And what I mean by that is your cooldowns weren't really used on this soldier. It was just used to get you up here. You're basically in the same position as if you walked up these stairs. So if we want to make this a hard engage, and I think this is a good opportunity for a hard engage, even if you don't net the kill, your goal should be to dislodge this soldier, get him off this high ground, and then let your team walk up towards the point. But because... Also, a bit of misfocus between you and your diva. I'm not sure what communication was like in the game, but always calming targets like that are a good idea. And eventually the soldier falls back, but again, I don't think he even had to. Looking back at this replay, I think he just felt because there were so many bodies up there, he should move, but we can see how little pressure he's actually under. You're shooting your guns at him, but even if he just stayed on his heal station there, he's full HP. So make sure to be ready to commit when it's time to hard commit, and communicate with your team when it's appropriate too. So if your team's saying we need to deal with a soldier, or if you and your diva are talking to each other about where you're diving, that target call needs to come through and that focus needs to come through just to make that easier on everyone.
Okay.
Bit of a similar thing here. Should definitely note that honest positioning. I'm surprised she's not looking for a sleep on you right now. But again, expect them to know where you are when you're sort of rolling past them in those situations. Hollywood, I will say, it's not an easy map to get into as ball. Your routes are a bit limited. I think something that might help you, this is like a small individual ball trick. You can actually make rollouts where you grapple like somewhere on this roof, where you'd go over this roof and you'll be able to slam up here. And you can sort of like start the slam down here, you'll slide down the roof and hit this target right here. If you need more creative approaches, I'd recommend something like that, because your options here are pretty limited. You're basically coming in main, coming in on the alley. If you spend a ton of time, you can come through second point and maybe get up here, but basically these are your main two options. So adding a little bit of creativity here can go a long way. It basically avoids ever showing to people on point, like that Hog or that Ana that might be watching for you. So as long as you know this is where you want to commit and your team's ready to follow up, look for ways to get up there as quickly as possible, because it seems right now we're spending a lot of time setting up on these flanks, but not enough time actually setting up the execution. So like you're getting in position, you're ready to follow up, you're ready to go in, you're ready to follow up people that go in, but something is delaying that, whether that's a Lucio boop, whether that's a ball or a Hog marking you, whether that's Tracer tickling you down and forcing you back. It seems like every time we've gone in so far, there's been something obstructing your way in.
Yep.
Going in now. Oh no.
Yeah.
I get what you were trying to do. Again, an easy way to clean this up is just scout out your target before showing your body. Use your third-person camera. Sit right here. You know this soldier's up here by now. He's been up here this whole game. Sit right here, just outside of grapple range. Grapple on that pillar, just like you were trying to do, before bringing your body out, and then plan your movement and plan your action ahead of time, and then follow through. Just give yourself that extra second. That eliminates soldiers' time to react, because you're not making the play after you've already shown yourself. It eliminates Lucio's ability to peel unless he's already been scouting you on the stairs. So again, just give yourself a little bit more space, give yourself a little bit more time, make this a lot easier to execute by just having that heads up play. It seems like you're going in and sort of reacting instead of scouting and then proactively planning your engagement. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
And this is going to be like unique to you as well. Like anytime you're setting up a dive, anytime you're coordinating with a team member, you should assume that whatever you're doing as an individual is entirely on you. And these are all decisions you can make as an individual that don't even affect anyone else's play. You can make the play and engage here, but these little decisions like peeking around corners with third-person camera, giving yourself time to roll out, all those things, scouting, anything that might stop your movement, those are individual things that you need to account for. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to follow up team plays. You're not going to have the information you need to set up those dives and all that stuff.
Okay.
So got to be really proactive, especially when you're the most mobile person on your team. You are the one getting the information. You are the one acting on it. Luckily, the soldier isolates himself, so we end up taking him down. So, again, obviously you didn't get punished, and this was actually highly beneficial for you, but this was really telegraphed movement. Walking, or I should say rolling over to the elevator, taking the elevator up, and sort of being in that Ana's face and scaring her off, as opposed to looking for ways to grapple up to her, looking for ways to grapple around the point and engage on something closer to your team. But if your target is this Ana, if I'm that Ana player, I would be kicking myself for not seeing you roll around, get on the elevator, hearing the elevator go all the way up, not 180 sleeping you in like the easiest sleep range possible, right?
Right.
So maybe she didn't have sleep. Maybe she's just completely tunneled to what's going on point. Maybe she's just got no audio or something. But you can't count on these situations working out in your favor. And sorry, go ahead.
I think I do remember hearing the sleep on that
Okay.
before I went up there.
Maybe I'm not listening properly then.
Sorry, I think that's also where she canistered.
Mm-hmm. Just fast forward a little bit. Soldier kill. So I'm just gonna pause right here. Let's just look. So she does have sleep.
Oh.
Yeah. There's no reason there's no reason for her to panic and drop like this. She can just turn around, sleep you, and then go back to doing her thing. But because of the way she acted, it made your play definitely worth it. But again, in the future, against a better Ana in this situation, all that time rolling out, all the time taking the elevator, it just gets nullified by a single cooldown. So if you're trying to execute faster, make sure you're using your mobility as the ball player. Make sure you're using your cooldowns as aggressively as possible. We just got a pick, so we want to be aggressive, right? We want to take the fight to them. We don't want to let them stabilize in any way, so we want to keep up the pressure. But this was just a little bit too slow, and I would say it's very easily punished, but you got away with murder here because they weren't paying enough attention. So remember, if you were playing something like Tracer and you weren't like blinking into the fight, or you weren't like blinking to get on a priority target during these fights, I'd be saying the same thing to you. Use your cooldowns aggressively in that situation. And now we're just cleaning up on point. Not too much to say about this. They're just coming in one by one. Easy enough. You could be a little bit more aggressive here, being like more in their face so your team has an easier job, like your Junkrat and your Zen and your Soldier in particular have an easier job, but there was no real threats in your face anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. Here, I would definitely like to see you moving up though. Like as soon as the point's capped, as soon as you see there's no pressure, as soon as you see your diva moving up as well, this is where you should be looking to fight for space. This sort of idea of time between fights, you should always be doing something. Whether or not that's team fighting is a different issue, but there's always something to be doing in Overwatch. And typically, when you're between fights, it doesn't mean just like standing on payload. It typically means looking for the best position to take the next fight. So anytime you've got these downtimes where you're not looking at a target, you're not setting up to dive a target, you're not actively shooting a target, think about what's the next fight's going to look like. And sometimes that means staying on cart if it's like about to cap or something like that. Like I say, we're at the end of second point. The cart's like right here. Sure, maybe you want to stay around the cart. But in situations like this where you've just gotten a couple picks, you know that you have the numbers advantage. You should be the one in their face to solidify your advantage, get more space for your team, build more aggressive stance, and then punish anyone that's not falling back on their side. So for example, since we got the kill on that soldier right near the end, right? So since their soldiers we know is not going to be with them, we can try to press an advantage. It doesn't necessarily mean going deep and trying to 1v1 their Ana in the backline or something like that, but it should mean a little bit of forward pressure, a little bit of angles around this choke, a little bit setting up on high grounds maybe, looking to roll from behind them, looking to slam on top of priority targets, stuff like that. It doesn't mean engage right away. You still need to wait for your team to get some space, obviously, but that forward pressure needs to come from you as the frontliner in this situation. So right now, you're basically playing like the Zen or the Soldier. You're playing with the backline, you're playing to shoot your guns, but you're not setting up an engage. And now that we're down 2 members, now you're looking to go aggressive, but we're down members and they've got their foot on the gas now, and we're sort of on the back foot. So it's a bit of mistimed priorities, I would say, during this fight, from what I'm seeing. Oh god. The replay speed. Again, third-person camera, you should have the advantage. No one should be able to catch you off guard in these situations. So I'm not sure what exactly you were looking at, but cooldowns like Sleep Dart should absolutely be predicted in this kind of situation. I'm not sure. It looked like you just got a little lazy there.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds about right.
So again, this is sort of that time between fights, right? This isn't really a team fight going on. You're getting some attention, but you're not looking to engage in this situation. So another thing you should be thinking about beyond positioning to set up is your HP pool when setting up. If you're getting slept, if you're getting shot by Soldier in these pre-fight situations, it doesn't mean you need to give up positioning right away, but it usually means you're not going to be in a good position to engage right away either, right?
Right.
So looking at this picture right now, I'm guessing you're going to be forced to fall back. Whereas if we had saw the Ana, the Soldier, the ball collapsing on the position, since you're there alone, since we just lost a team fight, sort of, at the very least we were forced to give up space, you should be looking to create a situation where you can create space. Whereas instead you're looking at a situation where you're trying to hold this space. But again, since your team was forced back, you cannot hold this space alone. If it was just the Ana, if it was just the Soldier, if it was just the ball, you can contest that. But given the amount of resources they're sinking into this area, you need to respect that from the enemy team, fall back a little bit, and then set up to retake that space, whether that looks like going underneath them, looking for a grapple over here, going like all the way behind them, looking to roll through up top. There's lots of different ways you can approach that fight. But from this situation, from this picture we're looking at right now, you are not in a position to hold space. You need to find a new way to engage into the space.
Okay.
And even though you've got the numbers advantage right now, even though you've killed Hog, you have to keep in mind your backline. You're not playing with Tracer Genji or Echo or Pharah or anything, or Widow. There's no one up here to support you. So assume that your backline of Mei, Zen, Soldier right now is going to be playing slow, and you need to create situations that work for them because they're not going to be able to reach you.
Okay.
That was a lot of words. That was all good? That all makes sense?
Yeah. Let me write a couple notes there
Sure.
just to make sure.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway is, number one, understand the reach of your backline and understand the flow of the enemy team as well as your team. So if your team's getting pushed back, you're likely not going to have as much staying power when you're up this far from your team. Whereas if you are pushing aggressively, you want to keep pushing for more space, you want to keep threatening more space and enable even more aggression. But you need to respect that sort of back and forth of Overwatch, really, of any team fight.
Okay.
So yeah, in this situation, like it's a really good situation to be in. It's just you, as an individual right now, aren't able to push this advantage that we just got by killing Hog because you're currently being forced out. Good?
Yep. Yep.
All right, let's keep going. Oh, the replay bug. I would have liked to see a more creative or a deeper rollout, at least, if you're going for this mind play. One, we are at a huge advantage because we've gotten a pick, we've used an ultimate like Transcendence, so we know we're healthy, and we know we're looking to go aggressive with all the cooldowns we just used. We just forced Genji out as well, meaning our backline's not actively being threatened. If you want to push this even further, given here, let's look at a third-person POV. Given where the people are right now, your mines right here would have been perfect. But the time it takes to roll out and the fact that they're already on the back foot, like there's nothing keeping them in the space, you should assume that they're going to be like kiting back even further. Most teams in general will kite back along the sort of payload path. So I would like to see in this situation, for example, a good thing you could have done would be roll out this way instead, catch them on the back foot. Instead of mining exactly where their front line is right now, mine a little bit behind them so that our forward pressure from the team keeps moving forward since we do have an advantage, and you're there to cut off their escape and potentially boop them back into our aggressive positioning. This is sort of, again, the other side of the coin of where you're holding too far up and your team's not ready to go in. This is you being, one, not ready right away because you had to go get healed, which is understandable, but not being right away to punish or enable this aggression, and going a little bit too short on your aggression. Again, since you are the most mobile member on your team, you should be the one getting behind them, getting the attention, getting the distraction, slowing them down, all that sort of stuff. So again, if we watch from third person, you can see how far they've already backed up by the time mines come out. And yes, they've split up. A more organized team would probably stay together and be even safer. But these mines are not currently threatening anyone.
Right.
It cut the ball off, but he's so mobile it's not going to matter. Whereas if you had done it here, it would have basically cut the map in two, and we could focus down these three members as they're trying to escape, because these members would be either forced to play long sight lines or forced to clear the mines slowly or forced to play inside this building with limited sight lines and just cut off this entire lane for them, basically.
Okay.
So again, just a little bit more aggressive there. The mine usage makes sense for this situation. You want to cut off their escape. It's just, given this, the way the fight was going, you were a little bit too slow to the fight, and you didn't go quite deep enough to punish them as effectively as you could have. Okay. Replay keeps slowing down. Let me look at this fight from third person. I'm not sure exactly what killed our momentum so much. So Zen going down, obviously. Let's go even further back. So from this point onward, the biggest thing is we've split up. We've split our attention between taking high ground for a soldier and pushing with your front line. So again, your window to go aggressive was basically closed as soon as your mines didn't get enough value. So you pushing even further into this backline, again, remember your backline is Soldier, Zen, Mei. You don't have Tracer, you don't have Genji, you don't have those mobile heroes. So it's only going to be you as tanks trying to punish this. The reason that the defenders are able to re-aggress in this situation is because your aggressive movements, not just you and D.Va, your both aggressive movements ended up inadvertently splitting the team in half. They've basically cut you off just by the geometry of the map. You're not in range to go help your backline if they get pressured, same with your soldier. And they're not in range or in sight lines to help this aggression. So this means two things. This means it increases the likelihood of your backline being punished, and it decreases the likelihood of this aggressive movement having value.
Okay.
And this is sort of like, this is always going to happen in ranked. People are going to have different ideas of what they should be doing at any given moment. But the way you can control that is trying to predict these situations based on, one, the maneuverability of your backline. Because again, the aggressive movement happened here and basically ended past this line. Now they've stabilized, their backline's safe, relatively safe, even though they're so split. And pushing aggression past this line, like we are right here, means it's very, very hard to find value, and it weakens our backline. So it's like a double negative. or no, double negative usually means it's a positive thing. It's like it's 2 strikes. And then Hog finding a pick on the Zen is just the nail in the coffin, because now we're all falling back to cart trying to stabilize ourselves, and we didn't find enough value to actually deny them any positioning. Like, sure, they're not on the high ground or anything, but their backline's still really safe, still really able to get into this fight, and we're all stuck on payload trying to heal up. We're open to these flanks. We're not pressuring anywhere at this moment. Understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
And you can sort of like see the picture. It was like we want to go aggressive, but then we miss our window just slightly and we over-aggress, and that's what's getting us punished here. And yeah, obviously, like, lots of individual things could have cleaned this up, but you as the ball player here should recognize when going deep is going too deep.
Okay. Yeah, this all makes sense for what I was feeling was the overarching issue of just like not having the big picture as
and that's probably one of the hardest things to gauge in Overwatch is what's happening around you. You can only see so much, and that's where communication usually comes in really clutch, especially in a structured, coordinated like team environment. Coordination and communication sort of becomes your second set of eyes. But even when you're playing ranked, you need to think, at the very least, think of what your team is capable of doing in terms of their kits, and play around that sort of range. Not just what you see you're capable of doing. Think of not only what you can do as an individual, think of what your team can help you do, or think of what your team might need help doing. This is another good example of you going over aggressive in between fights. Just looking back. This was obviously a lost fight. They've got 6 members. We just lost 2. The best thing we can hope to do here is look to punish these over-aggressive members in the same way they punished you and D.Va. So their aggression happened. Their aggressive window was about here. They punished us for over-aggressing earlier, so this is their team fight that they've already won. But if they overstep this sort of line and they cut themselves off from their back line, that's where you can look to re-engage on these individual members. Okay. And again, likelihood, you're not going to 1v1 a Hog and burn him down, but if you can keep him past his team's range for long enough, then your team has an opportunity to freeze him with Mei, to get some shots on McCree, to get a Discord on him, burn him down, burn his resources, stuff like that. Same for this Genji. But going deep, like we saw you do, just rewatching from third person. So already they've stabilized. They've given up their aggression, so we need to be thinking about breaking through the space. Again, we're no longer looking to punish. But your movement here is, like we talked about on first point, it's predictable. They can see you coming all the way from back here. Grapple range is very predictable for things like hooks, things like sleep darts, flashbangs, brig stuns. All those things are very, very punishing. So again, need to be more creative with our approach. And it seems like you're looking to fight right away. And I'm not sure what was going through your head at the time and what made you sort of make that decision. Because even if your rollout didn't get punished, you're putting in a position to like slam right here, right?
Right.
And again, look where your backline is. Look where the members who are going to capitalize on this play are. So yes, you're going to get a huge 4-man slam potentially. You're going to get a ton of ult charge. You're going to get some good shots off into all these members, and you're going to keep them there for a decent amount of time. But no one is there to capitalize on that. There's no Zen 5-orbing anyone. There's no Discord coming out. There's no Soldier shooting freely. There's no Mei following up with freezes. There's not even a D.Va there to keep you alive and help you get out if you need to. So again, comes back to that common theme of where is my team and can they fight where I'm fighting?
Okay.
And yeah, even if you don't die here, it forces you out of the fight, makes your team have to wait for your next set of cooldowns, your next setup, all that stuff. But luckily, they've committed 2 ultimates for some reason to try and punish this, which, again, now they're in a stage of over-aggressing. You can see how dangerous their position is. Even though they're all together, this is a very hard position to hold. Their sight lines are limited. They're open to flanks from this Mei like we just saw. This is exactly the time you want to engage his ball and keep them in this sort of kill zone. So, we're coming in fast. We're rolling through. So we're contesting payload. So, why did we decide to contest payload here instead of looking to fight? Do you remember?
I think it was honestly because I thought I didn't think they had much object permanence.
Right, you thought they'd forget about you and you get some free card space?
Yeah.
Okay, so typically there's sort of, yeah, I say there's two situations where we want ball to contest payload like this. One is if it's like already a lost fight and we want to get a little bit of cart space. Like, for example, one of these fights beforehand where our team was already like down 2 members, they were pushing into our spawn. Then you go contest the cart if they haven't noticed you, stuff like that, and you force them back. You force them to give up any aggressive positioning they've found to try and go contest the cart. Or the cart can be used as sort of a secondary resource to create space. And this is going to be sort of a bit more of an advanced concept, so bear with me for a second.
Okay.
If we think of the cart as a tool to create map pressure, what's the intended reaction you want to pull away from the enemy team?
1 or 2 people to come after me to chase.
Exactly. In this case, we see the Lucio falling back. So let's say, for example, actually, this isn't a not bad example. I still think you should have fought here, but let's say we weren't able to fight here, and this was like their default positioning to start the fight. You going past them, going back to the cart here, will, one, draw an entire member back. This means they no longer have speed, they no longer have peeling for their Ana, and it might take even more attention away from them. We see the monkey's looking to jump back already. The soldier might turn and put a few shots on you to get you off cart. That amount of attention that's taken away from the front line, a position they're already set to hold, now gives your team a resource advantage to break through this space. So while this space was initially in their favor, taking the attention of 1 or 2 or more members away means that your team has a much easier time breaking into that space. The added advantage as the ball player, you often see this as Tracer sometimes too, is you have much more mobility than the majority of the cast. So for example, if this Lucio wasn't around to come contest you and the monkey jumps you instead, or a Reinhardt starts backing up to go touch the payload, or any tank really, or any DPS member that doesn't have mobility, the hog comes back to hook you or something, you will get away and rejoin this fight, again, the space we're trying to break through as a team. You'll be there way sooner than any members that come back to cart. Monkey burns his jump, he won't have his jump to re-engage. Hog moves over here, tries to use his hook on you, he won't waddle back in time before you get there as ball.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So this is, again, a pretty advanced concept, and you usually only see this at higher levels or in coordinated play. But in order for you to make that decision, it needs to be a situation where you know you don't have an advantage going into some sort of space. So this is a good example. It's a choke point your team has to go through. Your flank options are somewhat limited. It's hard to roll through this point. But if you can get behind them, again, like you said, their object permanence might hinder them, and you might just get some free cart. But the majority of the time, you should expect at least one member, like this Lucio, to come contest you, if not outright punish you. So be ready for that moment, and then use that moment to re-engage where you actually want the fight to happen, where we're trying to break through a certain choke point, a certain corner, a certain space, even a certain high ground. If they're all 6 of them playing on this high ground, one of them has to drop to touch the cart, and then you can look to re-engage up here if you've got like a full dive team or something.
Okay.
So, yeah, main triggers to find those situations are if a team's holding away from the payload, like close holding, and if they have slow members that are more punishing. If they've got a member like Tracer who can just mark you the whole time, you're just going to get poked out. If they got another ball and the ball just comes to contest you, it's going to be a bad time generally. But if you can punish these slower members or with more valuable cooldowns like Winston Jump, it can be really, really valuable. But in general, like I said, this fight in particular, we should have looked to punish their forward aggression more heavily. We should have kept them here. Mei was on a huge flank, and they were all grouped up as 6. This is a huge slam opportunity. If instead of rolling through them here, you roll just above them and slam down, we got really safe angles from our Zen and Soldier. At the very least, if we don't get any kills, we burn a ton of resources, and they're not in a position to stabilize very easily. They're going to have to stay on the ground. Even if they kite all the way back down like the main lane here, we still have really good sight lines to continue the aggression and chase ourselves. So yeah, a lot of words on that one fight, but a couple different concepts I wanted to cover. In general, don't rely too much on that cart pressure as a concept, but there are certain situations you'll find it valuable. In this case, I wouldn't say it's one of them, but I just wanted to sort of explain the idea behind it. And again, so you saw that Winston jump. This is a perfect time for you to go back to the fight, go punish this Hog and Ana, go punish this soldier, because your team's there, and look how they just split themselves down the middle by spending resources to get back to the cart. So yeah, your intention with touching the payload shouldn't necessarily be just to push the payload. It should be to set up the real fight, so to speak.
Okay.
So yeah, this is sort of that first example I mentioned where you're already in a losing fight. You heard them commit Blade. You're pulling resources off them so they can't set up a super forward aggression. In this situation, you should be having a lot of priority on getting out and avoiding cooldowns like Sleep and Hook, and making sure you can regroup with the team and help stabilize for them. So again, it looks like we're moving a bit telegraphed. We're coming down main. If you were to do anything differently coming through breaking this choke, what ideas might you have? So they're holding this space. They've got angles. They've got high ground. They've got Hog threatening all these areas. What could you do differently to break through this space in particular? Any thoughts?
The inside the building on our right, currently on the left, is a thought, but I think I was afraid of the hog hook trying to go through there.
So, obviously, yes. Anytime you're setting up, just like we saw in first point, Hog is very punishing for that kind of rollout. The difference here compared to first point is this space, or even back here, is much easier for your team to aggress onto than the point where you were trying to roll around on first point. So even if you do get hooked by Hog, the follow-up potential, even from like this range, but ideally some of them would be coming this way with you as well, is much easier to punish because there's a route for your backline to get there. At the very least, there's a route for them to have sight lines onto. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So obviously, ideally, they don't just run in a conga line behind you and get messed up by Winston, Lucio, Genji. Ideally, they are also taking a somewhat similar route, or at the very least playing safe around this corner, giving you Discord on the Hog, giving you potential to force them out, and stuff like that. But this is a good example of how you can isolate individual defending members. And as the prime engager, these are the sort of weaknesses you're looking to punish as an aggressor. Is there any chance you're familiar with chess and sort of chess tactics?
Not especially, no.
So there's this concept in chess called, people usually refer to it as hanging pieces. And that typically means there's a way for you to aggress on a certain piece where they have no coverage from the rest of their team. So for example, if they've got their queen up here and there's no like bishops or rooks in line to cover the queen, you can take that queen for free. This Hog is a free take. In order for them to cover that Hog, they need to wrap all the way around here, wrap all the way through this building. Sure, Soldier can help cover, but you can commit more resources to dealing with this Hog than this Hog will have to defend him. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's the opportunity you want to look for when breaking through these defenses. This will also look like if they're playing like a Rhine really aggressive, but no one's standing with him. You can just take short angles around the Rhine shield, poke him down, force him back. This can look like individual DPS members, like this Soldier up here. If there's no one guarding this alley and Soldier's up here alone, you can just grapple, boop him off yourself, or if you have a dive tank like Diva to come with you, or a diver like Genji to come with you, that's an easy pick off, or at the very least, force his resources, deny his positioning. Remember that every advantage doesn't need to look like a kill. You can force these movements, you can force these cooldowns, you can force breaking through this space by attacking these weaker members of the enemy team. So already we're looking like we're aggressing in the right space. I think generally you don't want to lock yourselves into duels too often, like I just saw. Majority of the reason being many members of the cast can either out-duel you, as in put in more damage than you're able to, and force you out of the fight before you can force them out. Or, from what I'm seeing in general, since you do have a tendency to aggress a little bit ahead of your team, especially when your team is this slow, it's hard to close out those duels as an individual, versus typically a defending team will have resources to commit to their position. So if Soldier's up here, typically there's someone to come cover him, as we saw the Hog came up.
Yep.
So locked yourself into that duel with Soldier a little bit too early, and I think at that range, like when he's basically across his bridge, you should know you're not going to get that kill, unless he just stands still or something and you're able to pump a bunch of headshots into him. Your initial burst window of like the boops, the slams, and stuff like that, you should be able to gauge whether or not you're going to be able to net the kill. Easy ways to sort of make that decision are obviously health pool, damage potential. If you're going up against a Reaper, you'll just never win the duel in the close range. If you're going against a Soldier, you'll never win the duel in the long range, right?
Right.
So keep those things in mind. Anytime you find yourself in a 1v1 or even technically 1v2 situations, you need to be a little bit faster in making that judgment call and respecting their ability to peel for each other and give up positioning and fall back to each other and that sort of thing. Members you should definitely be looking to punish are members like Zen, Ana if she's got no cooldowns, McCree if he's got no flashbang. Slow moving members with low self-sustainability are easy targets, but keep in mind you are not Tracer. You're not going to get instant burst kills as often as her, but you do have the potential to outduel some members, just not quite as aggressively as someone like Tracer.
Sure.
Again, a very linear approach onto this Ana. Sorry, I'm pausing every 2 seconds. Just have a lot to talk about. A very linear approach. That's been a pretty common theme this review so far. When you see these targets, again, a bit outside of range of your team. Yes, you've got McCree on the high ground, but we haven't broken through this space, and you're already aggressing all the way back here. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
So we've just spent this time denying this high ground, forcing them to fall back to this high ground and play around the point. But they're still looking to fight around the point. Even though they've given up space, it just means that their ideal fight location has gone from like up here to now back here. But it's still not all the way back here. And that's where you're looking to aggress. So again, if it takes turning around, looking where your backline is, thinking of what kind of sightlines they have, give yourself a second to do that. Or if it takes in communication, can we dive Ana, waiting for that confirmation from someone like your Diva, someone like one of your DPS who can follow up, wait for that, or even Zen who might be able to Discord. But in general, you're ahead of the team, and it's an easy thing to do when you've got this slow of a backline, but it still needs to be respected that splitting yourself from the team this much, yes, you've completely denied any value this Ana might find during the fight, but you'd be finding more value by fighting with your team.
Okay.
Luckily, we have the Trance and the Blizzard to deny their engage, but if we didn't have those resources, it might have gone a little bit differently. Again, here, we're setting up on payload. Now that we've forced recall, that was an interesting boop. I'd like to see you put more priority on here by default. It seems like your default is pushing the payload. Your default should be setting up to either engage where you think the fight's going to be, likely on the payload in this instance, or forward scouting on positions like this where you use the corner, see where people are coming from. Even since you have so much mobility, even just like moving through to third point, setting up somewhere around here, scouting where they're coming out, saying, oh, they're all coming right door, monkeys out first, be ready to engage. And then you roll through their backline to slow them down after one person walks out, or you come out ready to slam right at this door. Abuse these chokes, use your third person camera, use your mobility to your advantage instead of just sitting on cart like a Zen or a Soldier would.
Right.
And yeah, again, this is good pressure on the Tracer, but you don't want to be locked into that duel too often. Luckily, obviously, she had other priorities to deal with. But your thought process in that situation should be looking to engage on the real fight, not dealing with the Tracer as often as possible. A little bit of awkward movement here. Seems like you still might be struggling a little bit with these rollouts and these little bits of terrain that are bumping you around. I remember that from last time. That's going to come with time, just being comfortable on the hero. I think already I'm seeing it's more the decision making than the actual mechanics that I'm more concerned with, so I'm not going to call you out too much for it. But make sure you're looking at situations like this and thinking of what you could have done better, what you should have thought of before bumping into the trash can, bumping into this thing to get up top, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, this was a hell of a bad movement game.
Yeah.
I think it was first comp game of the day, if I remember right, after a little bit of warm up. Yeah,
it's understandable. There's going to be you're always going to make what I call unforced errors, where it's just you forgot to account for something, you're not comfortable in a certain situation, lots of different things. Again, very linear approach. I'm going to call you out every time for this, though, because this isn't a mechanical issue. This is a decision-making issue, where you're just flying straight down main. You see Ana. Basically, from Ana's POV, let's look how, let's look at what you look like from Ana's POV in this situation. If she's even there on time. Okay, yeah. You're coming up right here. She decides not to even look at you, I guess, but from standing right here, your spacing from that Ana looked, so like here's the grapple. Basically looked like you going up here, and then this is the range of motion you create at this point. There's no horizontal movement. There's a lot of space between Ana and you for her to line up a sleep dart, and then you even go for the slam, which suspends you in midair momentarily, where she can, if she's waiting for the cooldown, can react to it very easily and just deny that whole ability. So number one thing when looking for these rollouts, take your time to scout. Use your third-person camera. I'm going to keep saying it. Scout out ahead, scout out over here, look for targets. If that on is a priority, you probably don't want to close this much distance. Even if you were Winston and you had bubble available, I wouldn't recommend jumping in a straight line like this. At the very least, you could look to roll out from here, come from a little bit of an off angle, so at the very least she has to turn away from her team, away from the rest of your team to deal with you. Or I would say ideally come from up here, where you can scout her out really easily, use your third-person camera, roll through, get the boop on her as well as the slam after like dipping off the ledge, and hopefully net yourself the kill from there. But yeah, this was way, way, way too telegraphed, and I think you're getting punished accordingly.
Yep.
And it's hard. I know it's hard, especially on a point that's this closed off. There's not many flank routes. There's not many easy sight lines that you can make yourself through, but you still have options. And the only way you're going to find out what your options are by getting that intel before committing. So this right now, this is really great scouting. This is, you already see all 6 members. You know where the tanks are. You know where the backline is. You know everything at this point. Ideally, at this point, you're coordinating with your team about where you want to aggress. And again, we can think about hanging pieces. We can look to aggress in certain areas where they can't fully cover for each other. It's a lot harder on this point because they basically have open sight lines all over the place, right? They're just a big spider web of sight lines. Yeah. So they can pretty easily cover each other. So likely in this scenario, you'll probably want to go as aggressive as possible to deny being in range from these members and getting as much value on the backline members. That, or you look to punish people who are going aggressive, or people who burn cooldowns. Like if you see Hog burn Hook, you see he's got Discord, you can engage on him. You see Sigma no shield, no shift, you can call your team to engage on him. Stuff like that. There's no cookie cutter answer to these kind of responses unless you're in a really coordinated environment. This is just, I'm going to say, a really easy point to hold for defenders. So typically, in a ranked setting at least, it will look like punishing mistakes, whether that's Hog overstaying his welcome after getting poked out and discorded, whether that's Sigma losing a shield, whether that's them wasting cooldowns, stuff like that are good things to punish, but finding an opening here is going to be much harder compared to open style maps like Second Point, where there's lanes you can use to abuse, there's flanks you can take. But you're doing the right thing already by getting that information, hopefully relaying it to your team, and waiting for your opportunity to engage. Another situation, I would say the matchup against Lucio is probably a skill-based matchup. Obviously, if your tracking's really good, you can just burn him down, but his passive healing is going to be really hard to deal with in a longer engage. Once you see this slam, you need to decide right away whether or not you can net the kill. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting time. And he would much rather be locked in a duel over time than you would. So I like that you're backing up already. Maybe it's based off the May kill, but I like that you didn't lock yourself into that duel. This is already a lost fight. You're slowing down their aggression a little bit good. I would say you left yourself in the open too much. Anytime you're not hard engaging, you want attention to be on you as little as possible because they have so many resources to pump into you, and it's basically just you looking to slow them down. So looking to roll through on an angle like this and then get out, looking to roll through here, get back out, all good. The way you took a bit of verticality made you a bit of an easier target, but it looks like you're going to be able to make it out anyway. So Won't say too much there. Just a mindset to keep thinking about is whether or not you're hard engaging and how much time you want to spend in the fight because of that. Again, not a duel you want to find yourself in. Honest cooldowns both are very punishing to you. And again, look how far ahead of your team you are. You already know you committed here. And this is where your team's ready to fight. You know that because you slammed, you used mines, you knew there was a lot of pressure that you needed to break through here. Even by getting the kill on Lucio, even by letting your team walk up, they're going to be slower to walk up and support you than the enemy team is going to be reacting to you. So you started this fight off really good. I could say you could have scouted the slam mines better, but they found value. But then your decision to keep going aggressive is something your team can't keep up with. So this was already a lot better than the engages we saw on second point where you got caught out ahead of your team. You started with your team. You started engaging on the point where your team was struggling to break through. But just because you won that engage doesn't mean you can immediately hit the gas again. You need to sort of wait, give your team time, set up your own engage. Again, you kind of went in with no scouting this second time, and you tunneled on the Ana a little bit too much. So a whole mixed bag of things you could have done differently there. And now, because you're not there to keep up the pressure, and we tried to over-aggress a little bit too early, granted it was overtime, so we kind of needed to fight fairly quickly, but definitely could have been cleaner. And it looks like they're holding this right before the cap. Yeah. Yep. All right. Any thoughts so far from that attack? We've already used up so much time. Sorry I talk so much.
Stuff good. It's all useful information. It's exactly what I wanted to hear about and know more about from thought process.
Mm-hmm. And again, anytime you load into a game, look at your backline. Or not, I shouldn't call it backline. Look at your DPS and supports. Having a tank that can dive with you should be probably considered a luxury because Ball, in general, should be very self-sufficient as a tank, as an engaged tank. So look for ways to support yourself in that regard. Don't expect Diva or Monkey to enable you, but look at your DPS and look at your supports because they're going to be the ones who are punishing members based on the openings that you're creating. So when you're creating openings for Soldier, Junkrat, Mei, McCree, it's very different than the openings they're creating for Tracer, Genji, Echo, Doomfist, right?
Okay.
And that's usually going to come down to the range between you and them and the space that your backline has. Or, again, I should stop calling it the backline, the space that your DPS and support have. Okay. All right, fast forward a bit here. So defense, like we talked about last review, is a bit of a different beast than offense. You're not necessarily looking to create every engage possible. You're looking to create the right engage at the right time. And that's going to be largely based on the attacker's movements, and again, your backline's positioning. I keep saying backline. It's not always technically like behind you, so I don't want to call it backline every time because your job changes very much if you have flankers, but where your damage dealers are going to be. So right here, based on this positioning, I would say this is your ideal fight zone. Would you agree?
Yes, and I remember wanting to wait for the first tank to come through and displace him for that.
Yeah, perfect.
It did not happen because I think our McCree exploded.
Oh, okay. We'll take a look. But yeah, just to highlight the concepts, regardless of what is about to actually happen, the concept here is punish members who move through a choke by cutting them off from the rest of their team. Yep. Pretty simple stuff. So if a Roadhog or a Sigma walks here and you boop him here, he's not going to get healing around this corner, whereas your team can shoot at him. Again, we're isolating and pumping more resources into a target than they're going to be able to receive to survive.
That's one technique I did get down.
Awesome. Oh, but yeah, that hook kind of has the opposite effect and the late lamp doesn't help either. I could say that you could try to roll through and deny value from that follow-up of the hook, but realistically, he's probably going to die no matter what you do in that situation, so I don't hate the waiting either. And yeah, we've lost Sigma as well, and Baptiste. All right. So, unfortunately, defending space is not something Ball's great at. You're not an anchor tank. You can't contest one set of space for a long amount of time, you're looking for those short engages, keeping them there just long enough to punish them, getting out and setting up the next engage. In a disadvantaged state, if we look back real quick, just as everyone's dying, in a disadvantaged state, the best thing I could say you should be trying to do is find as much individual value as possible, because we know after any pick, after any resource burn, they're looking to take space. They're looking to move up, likely count a point, likely set up ground, potentially take high ground, set up flanks over here, for their backline like Hanzo, like Ana and stuff like that. What you can do is try to punish any chance of over-aggression. And this isn't going to happen every time. Teams will play different levels of coordinated, depending on what rank you are, depending on what teammates or what enemy teammates they have. But at this point, your team has already lost the coordinated effort of trying to engage here because you're down a member, you're forcing to give up space, you've lost a very key resource in the Baptiste lamp. So what I would say you should try to do here is ignore these tanks as much as possible, wait for them to split up and try to take more space than they should be allowed to. So let's watch and see what they try to do. So yeah, their Tracer's finding a ton of value too. We're getting isolated. We're engaging here. Instead of engaging on this front line here, one of the only ways you'll find a way back into this fight as a team is by getting value on one of these members. You can see how isolated they are from their team. So they're doing the right thing. Like, their positioning isn't bad, but it's slightly punishable based on the way the flight's been flowing. They've been just gassed nonstop because of how aggressive they're able to be because of the picks. You can try to slow that down by, instead of engaging here, just finding this Hanzo or finding this Ana. But again, Ana's a bit questionable to engage on. The ideal situation that you create by doing that is by just slowing their aggression, forcing them into like a hard wall where if they decide to keep aggressing, the resource advantage doesn't favor them as much anymore. So for example, if they don't have Hanzo or Ana, then crossing this line or crossing this line becomes more even for the rest of your team. And again, just like we talked about with cart pressure, once you do go for this engagement, you are able to get back to the fight, the point fight in this case, faster than any of their members, either because you've killed them or you've forced them low HP and they need to regroup somewhere safer, go get a mega pack, stuff like that. But not a whole lot else I could say from this point. It's just a very quickly lost fight. But that's okay, those happen. So yeah, even stuff like that, even that small engage, denies a little bit of uptime for them and gives your team just the smallest amount of breathing room. But yeah, at this point it's a bit too late, so it doesn't really matter. At this point, you likely either want to just fully commit to getting out or stalling the point as much as possible.
Yeah, I did the latter, if I remember right.
Yeah. What I'd like to see at a coordinated level, I can't expect as much from ranked, obviously, is you communicating that set up for second, I'm going to stall first. So you call that you're going to give your team enough time to set up a real fight on second point. Because otherwise, they're just going to cap this point and snowball like all the way like up to this point before you get a real counter engage. Your mobility and your survivability and your independence allows you to do stuff like stall the point longer than many other members. So what you can do in those situations and communicate to your team is just say, this is lost, stop feeding in one by one. Sigma, there's nothing you're going to do by getting on point here other than dying and giving a ult charge and burning maybe 1 extra second. So you can burn more time than the rest of the cast, and you can reinforce faster than the rest of the cast. So if all 5 of them decide to set up here while you're stalling cart, even if you die, by the time they're pushing up, you'll be rolling back out and able to help the team out before they're able to punish them, most likely.
Okay.
So that's another case of using your mobility to your advantage. But again, that's something the team would need to understand, because as soon as anyone but you tries to do the same thing, it kind of just takes more and more and more away from your potential first fight on second point. And yeah, as we're seeing, this many lost members this late into the fight is not ideal. Oh, and the res. So yeah, we're stalling a decent amount of time, but what's more important? An extra 5 to 10 seconds or a really good first fight on second point? And I would argue that setting up for that first fight on second point is much, much, much more important.
Yeah.
But yeah, only so much you can do as an individual. I would say in those situations in the future, use the fact that you are so mobile and so tanky and so individually independent to communicate to your team that you can contest longer than they can, and just to set up and fall back and stuff like that. Same thing applies if we're all dying on cart. You should be the last one to die on cart because you'll reinforce faster and stuff like that. So here, already a lost fight because we didn't respect the snowball potential. I think what you're doing here is actually really, really good.
Okay.
Contesting the point here, it's not like the space matters too much. It's not like you're gonna deny a ton of space, but like in this area specifically, but what you are going to do is deny these members, and likely more members who are coming back to Peel, from fully taking over the map. And a coordinated team, as soon as they find an advantage and they're snowballing like this, they will just basically spawn camp the defending team here by just holding these 2 chokes, which are very hard to break out of. So by doing this, you're pulling resources away from this sort of like frontline area where they'd like to set up close, and you are buying your team a little bit more time. It means it's going to be easier to come through these chokes. It's going to be easier to retake the map, where that means retaking these high grounds, taking angles wherever, stuff like that. You're just buying time. And this, very similar to the first point setup, only really applies if you're the last one contesting cart, right? Because you're the fastest. You're likely the one who can stall the cart the most. And you being set up during the defending phase is less important than someone like your Baptiste being set up, or your Hanzo or your McCree being set up.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it seems the rest of your team didn't get the memo about setting up. So we're just taking a neutral fight, sitting in main right here. But this is by far not the worst position we could be in. And actually, the ultimates are winning this out for us. So, why do you think this fight's working out so well for us, I should say? If I go back just to look at it one more time. So, just before this, from this position. Oh, why are we all the way here? As soon as the flux came out and as soon as your mines came out, why do you think we are in a good position to win this?
In the setup to this, partly because I was coming from behind, and I don't think they communicated to their team where exactly I was. And then when I came out from the front, it was a quick angle around the building.
Mm-hmm. You got a lot more value than they were ready for.
Yeah. And then there was the ult combo between the flux and the mines.
Yeah, for sure. So this, in terms of positioning, I would say this is neutral positioning. Sure, Hog's out of the fight, but even if he was in this fight, he's not getting any crazy flanks off. Like, say he was back here with Hanzo. He's not doing anything of huge importance at this moment. This basically came down to ults being thrown back and forth. Your ult, McCree's ult, got more value than their Sigma ult, so you win this fight. And this might be a bit of a stretch to say, but you stalling payload before this sort of set this fight up. Yes, your team didn't take time, other than your McCree, to take any high ground or anything like that, but you denied them from setting up aggressively. The only one who's able to set up aggressively is Tracer, and you're never going to stop Tracer from setting up aggressively, so don't worry about that. There's no one on the high ground. If Sig was ulting from the high ground, for example, it'd be much easier to set up, and he wouldn't have died to Deadeye. Their Hanzo is just on the ground. Their Ana's just on the ground. They are not in a good position to take this fight. And granted, neither are you, really. Neither is your team, other than McCree, I guess. But because you have more ultimates, this neutral positioning fight turns into your advantage just because you have more resources. So this is a good example I wanted to point out of how stalling the payload came into your advantage. Because yes, you didn't enable anything really from your team. You found a good mine opportunity, but it's not like your mine was the single thing that won the fight. What really won this fight was just the fact that they couldn't do anything about your setup because they weren't set up themselves. You turned a situation where you were coming back from spawn into an even fight just by stalling the payload, by forcing resources onto yourself and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And this can happen on either side of the map. This can happen as an attacker, like we pointed out. Like if the cart's, say, back here, and you pull people off this high ground, you pull people away from this choke, you can set up an exact same situation where it just comes down to ults or resources at this point. It's not about positioning. It's not about the pre-fight, because you've taken that away from them. And that's all basically, like, I don't want to say like passively done, but it's not because of like an individual action you took. You didn't go and dislodge them. You didn't go slam on anyone on the high ground. you just pulled them off by being annoying, by being in their backline, by being an immovable object, so to speak. And that's one of the really valuable things about Ball, is how annoying he can be, how he can be everywhere the enemy team doesn't want him to be, and all that stuff. Don't want to repeat it too often, but again, a pretty linear approach there.
Yeah.
This is already looking better, but the timing was a bit off. So, get rid of this real quick. Looking into this fight, we're about to roll through. Again, we haven't scouted out anything other than we're being poked out by Tracer, so we don't want to be near her. We haven't scouted out any priority members, any priority positioning we want to punish. We haven't set up any priority positioning ourselves. So there's no real reason to engage here. And I like that you don't commit too hard, but you soft engaging here, I guess a little bit hard, like the slam, it's whatever, you build some ult charge. You soft engaging and then rolling out enables them to re-aggress. And the beat is just the icing on top for them, because this is a very easy aggressive window for them, since you just used your cooldowns basically doing nothing. You built a bit of ult charge, you stalled the cart for 2 seconds, but it didn't set up space, it didn't enable aggression from your team. So this beat is used purely aggressively. It's not even off the back of them trying to answer your aggression. And I'm guessing this is a communication issue, but also it's a scouting issue on your part, because again, you're going in blind, you're going in linearly, and you don't really know what you're trying to get out of this engage until it's too late. And now you want to come in to stop their aggression, but at this point it's too late. Whereas if you've just been a bit more patient, played either with your team or set up on a high ground or on a flank, maybe like over here by the mega, you'd be able to roll through and completely cut off this aggression, or come in from the high ground and completely cut off this aggression as soon as they try to move up. You can just split them in half. So that's what I'd like to see you prioritizing more. Instead of just thinking, okay, I got to roll through, I got to do as much as I can all the time, pick your moments. Be a lot more choosy with them. And unless you've got a reason to go in, whether that's a priority target, priority cooldowns you want to use, stuff like that, or just they're out of position and you're punishing that, try to limit this sort of, this mindset where you're just trying to like always set up for the next roll through. There has to be a reason for the roll through, or the reason for the slam, that kind of thing.
Okay.
All right, try to get through the rest of this defense a little bit quicker, so we're running low on time. At this point already, I like that you're setting up. You're not, ooh, okay. We are stalling payload a bit here. I would say, okay. You don't get punished, so it's not too bad. This can be a little bit dangerous, because if you die here, your team's chances of breaking it. Ooh, okay. So, yep. Probably last thing we'll talk about in the second point here. But again, we talked about how hard these are to break through. So just staying alive behind them makes your job infinitely easier. And I understand the desire to stop the payload, but realistically, the payload's not going to move from here to cap before your team respawns. So unless you see them like their front line moving all the way like past these chokes even and looking to spawn camp your team, you shouldn't be looking to commit just yet. You should be waiting for your team to regroup and then going in to help them break through space.
Gotcha.
Because yeah, one of the triggers that we talked about for looking to draw resources away was the fact that they were split from the rest of the team. They had so many resources on point still. It was really just the Hog and Tracer that were pushed up, but even without those two members, they were able to punish you. We use Dragon, but yeah, it's going to be a rough... go back to your POV. It's going to be a rough contest here. We're kind of running on fumes at this point. This is a good stall. Again, the setup for third point isn't too important based on spawns compared to second point at least. So stalling here is definitely the right call. I don't know if I would have committed mines. Might be nice to save those. This is, in my eyes at least, a pretty obviously lost fight.
Yep.
And that all comes down to just, again, spawn timings, when your team's able to reinforce. Fortunately, it looked like we didn't really coordinate that timing. And things we could have done better to do that would be just setting up beforehand, staying alive in their backline, for example, and being ready to set up for the time your team wants to burst through space, as well as just timing in general with your team. Their Tracer's on a tear.
Yeah, she was definitely, I think definitely the best member of their team.
Mm-hmm. Again, we're going in.
Yeah.
bit linear, but no one can realistically punish from this angle. If their Ana was on cart, maybe she could punish you. If their Hog was on cart, maybe they could punish you, but this isn't too bad. But where's your team? There's no one able to follow this up. And you didn't take time to scout who was on cart. You didn't take time to scout who you wanted to engage on. You just saw the cart was pushing. I gotta go in. So yeah, that's, I would say, probably the biggest takeaway from this review is just take your time. Think of the reason you're engaging, not just you want to engage. So this was actually a really good timing. Your team's in a good position to punish. They're looking to go aggressive, and this is slowing them down. This is a pretty good position to hold the cart in terms of defensive positioning. I'm not sure if you knew all that going in, but it's turning out much better already, as you can see. You're enabled by the rest of your team. Even if Sigma didn't ult there, you can see he's got resources to spend on your aggression. And yeah, much better. And that comes down to so many things. Your team's position, the enemy team's position, the geometry of the map, the resources you had. All these things you need to consider before going in. And it seems like you're kind of rolling the dice every time you go in. So try to make an effort anytime you've got this downtime to think, okay, what's my priority target? What's my priority fight position? Like, what corner do I want to fight on? What chokes do I want to fight on? Stuff like that. And then also, of course, where can my team follow me? Good?
Yep.
I remember the note from last time. Interesting pathing. I like the creativity. I think you could have gone a little faster, though. So let's look at what the enemy team was doing while you were making that rollout. So from here, obviously one of the benefits of starting on the high ground is just you can just roll off and slam, right? You don't need to build a rollout to swing yourself up into the air. So I'm curious why you opted not to just engage as fast as possible. Because in this situation, I would say best places to fight on this map are obviously at this corner where it's hard for backline to get good sightlines, or near this choke where you just have all the space in the world as defenders. So right now, I would say is a really good time to fight because you can cut the team in half, like we talked about, and your team is in a good position to follow up your aggression from this easy angle. But obviously the pulse is one thing, but now your team's being forced back, and they found an aggressive window before you did. And I'm not sure if this is a scouting issue or just a rollout issue or just communication or just general timing stuff, but you kind of missed your best opportunity to go in. And now by the time you are going in, your team's been forced so far back that they're no longer able to help you during your aggression. And we're down 3 members. So a little bit faster there definitely would have been the play. Especially since you have mines, you should be looking to create an aggressive opportunity as often as possible, I would say, in general, unless there's a specific thing you need to counter.
I think I was looking at my, I got focused down a little bit when I was hanging over the top at first. I was looking for the health pack before I engaged.
Okay, that's fair. I would say, though, if you are waiting for a health pack or anything is stopping your engage, you need to reassess your engage timing then. So instead of, if you're initially planning to engage around here, but you know you need to take time to change your rollout to get some HP back, whatever, you probably want to plan to engage around here instead, because they're not going to stop just because you need health, right? They're always going to keep the pressure up. And just like we talked about, by forcing resources out of them and then taking space off that, they're going to do the same if they know they've poked you out. They know they've got some time before you can engage. So expect that and look to hit them a bit further up down the road.
Okay.
Fast forward a bit through this. We did stabilize, fortunately. Again, this is a pretty safe point to defend. Very hard to break through as attackers. Engaging with Blade. Ideally, again, we take a more creative angle to enable the Blade and be able to go deeper. This was a case of Genji actually going too deep, but not much you can do about that. Maybe if he was communicating targets, you could stay on him, but it's hard to say. And this is a good example of them punishing that over-aggression and then aggressing themselves. So this is sort of like, okay, good answers. Again, all these kills from what I'm seeing are just people being punished for going over aggressive. Your Genji went around the corner, he got killed because we don't have resources to commit to him. The enemy team went through this choke, they got killed because they couldn't pump enough resources, you know? Yep. So thinking about the map in ways of just the way it either cuts off you from your team or cuts off enemies from their team is how you probably want to think about engages. Because it's just so often we see people rounding corners or going through chokes and it just gets them killed. So here, again, where do you think the fight's going to happen? Where do you want to be when the fight breaks out? You probably don't want to be down here. You probably want to be in a better rollout location, on the high ground for an easier rollout, on an off angle to either roll through them from whatever angle they come in, and think about likely this corner as an engage opportunity. Maybe you're holding close and you can punish up here, but if your whole team's not ready, that's not something you can do alone, or probably punishing around this choke around the cart. And right now, you don't seem really set up for any of those. So think about that, because now it took them being in line of sight of you for you to make that choice to fall back and set up. Whereas you should be thinking that as soon as the last fight ends, as soon as you're not focusing down something, as soon as you're not setting up the next dive, think about where you're going to take the next fight every time.
Okay.
Again,
yep.
The last time, I promise.
Oh, it's the last roll.
No target. You're going deep, and you're cutting yourself off from the team. This geometry, like, sure, there's a sight line here, maybe, that can save you, but you're cutting yourself off from the team. Like, if this was just solid wall, there's just nothing they can do for you. So don't make it hard on your team to support you. Make it easy on them by fighting where they can have influence. And again, not respecting the cooldowns, not scouting out your target. And now, you are going to be really hard-pressed to find a good rollout, because you were completely forced out of that fight. That was a good aggression timing, but at this point, your team's so far on the back foot, it looks like it's not going to be enough. Last-ditch effort mines kills Tracer, which is good. Okay. Okay.
You're going to hate how we lose this.
Oh, no. It's looking pretty good for you guys right now. You're doing a good job of not over-aggressing. You're not tunneling too hard on deep targets. You're disrupting backline. Unfortunately, we're trying to... I think this is mainly an issue of overtime panic, but we were in a really good position there. If we had just held that position and slowly burned down their targets, or coordinated one-to-one, or sorry, like coordinated on one target together and take 2v1s, 3v1s, we would have been in a really good spot. But now it's just, they've broken through the choke. They have the resource and position advantage now.
The panic came out when they threw Bob out.
Yeah, if we go back just a little bit. So like surviving this flux and then punishing a few kills here were really, really good. If we just live here, if we just survive and punish these members who have pushed through, but instead we're off taking 1v1s. The mines take out the Lucio too. This already is a good position because they're not getting any payload pressure and your backline's surviving the hog aggression. Just coordinate. Kill the Sigma together. Kill the hog together. Instead, again, now we're pushing through the choke ourselves. Like you see the Genji going aggressive. You see all these members. Oh no! Use the map! But yeah, I think you know this story. It's the same as we've seen all map. Getting over aggressive through the map that doesn't benefit us as defenders is just not a good idea. And then the Bob just seals the deal, because without Bob, we might have been able to stabilize, but then it becomes the 7th man that just seals the deal for them. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. Any questions about anything we covered?
Nope, that was exactly what I wanted and needed to hear.
So yeah. Again, summarize biggest individual things. Be more creative with your rollouts. Even in limited space, you can still find ways to get creative. I would recommend for Hollywood specifically, if you don't know a ton of like map specific rollouts, there's a couple maps that can be good where you notice you're struggling, for example, to get up here. Grappling, like I think up here and then just going around, slamming on top of the roof can be really strong. Little things like that can be the difference maker in terms of whether or not you're able to get in. But avoiding those linear approaches, respecting enemy backline, cooldowns, hook, fake brig bash, McCree stun, and asleep, all those things, as well as engaging with a planned target in mind and for a good reason, and that typically means where the rest of your team can follow up. Aside from that, we talked about a lot of stuff, map specific stuff, map choke points, corners, and stuff like that, payload pressure, all that kind of stuff. Is there anything you wanted me to sort of reiterate and go back into? Any questions about any of that stuff?
Nope, I think it was a few points that we already went pretty deep on. I just need to, yeah. Ooh, start drawing lines in the map a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think based on your playstyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your headspace seems to be just engage, 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 engage. And that is one of the strengths of the ball, is like how often you can find engages. But if you're doing them at the wrong time, even though you're so mobile, even though you're so independent, your team can get punished for that. And there were a few situations we noticed that, specifically on second point, I think, were the best examples. But if at any time you're not getting value out of your engage, you need to stop and ask yourself why. Is it because you didn't wait for your team to get in position? Is it because you went too ahead of the team? Is it because you didn't hit a priority target or location, or you didn't respect a cooldown or something like that? Every time you die or every time you get forced out, you should be thinking about those things.
Yeah, I think some of it is whenever something isn't going right on the team, like ball gets the first blame because it's not, like a shield tank or front line. And I kind of just get over aggressive in response to try to like show that I'm doing things,
Right.
which just get punished for.
It's I would say the majority of people in ranked will always blame everyone else on their team besides themselves.
Right. Yep.
So don't worry too much about outside criticism, especially when you're in game. Focus on what you're trying to do. Think about if it makes sense. Like maybe you are making the wrong decision, but then ask yourself, what is the right decision? And focus on those areas we talked about. Focus on playing within your team's reach and hitting priority targets at the right time.